Hey, 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 this is BA, and welcome to Primary Planetary Trend. Try saying that 10 times fast. What this is going to be about is about the stock market and economic trends and so forth, and really the main trend behind the business cycle. Okay, let's get started on it. Luther Jensen was employed by W.D. Gann from the 1930s until Gann's death in 1955. This makes Luther Jensen's book, Astro Cycles and Speculative Markets, important. And I also did another video that goes more in depth into that. It's called Gann and Astro Cycles, okay, which is a reference to Jensen's book. Jensen's book's free on the internet, or I've got several hard copies here. No, I don't sell it. But I would definitely look into getting it. Okay, Sunspots. The work financed by the Harvard Committee on Research in Social Sciences has resulted in tracing this correlation, talking about sunspots, from the 17th century South Sea bubble down to the present year. The last sunspot cycle began with a minimum of spots in 1923, a maximum in 1928-29, and another minimum in 33-34. Another maximum point is expected late in 1938. Now, see, what he's talking about here is the economic activity follows these, meaning a rising sunspot cycle, more sunspots coming in, means rising economic activity and generally rising stock prices. A declining sunspot activity, or heading down in the sunspot numbers, correlates to declining economic activity and generally declining markets, as we'll see. Now, note here the spots minimum in 23. The market was in 1922. Maximum was in 28-29 for sunspots. The market peaked in 29. Minimum in 33-34 on sunspots, and market was low in 32, but it didn't really do good until late 34. Another maximum sunspots was 1938. Well, there's a peak in the stock market March in 1937 and in 38. Okay, so you can see there's a definite correlation in there. We're going to explore some of this and bring it forward into present day. Okay, this is from page 36 of Astro Cycles and Speculative Markets by Luther Jensen. A synthesis of the relationships by aspect and sign positions of Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, plus the sunspot cycle, is the framework upon which to project the primary trends of business and markets. Okay? This is key. Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus are known as the financial planets. And what he's saying here is to take the sunspot cycle and chart it out, and then use the aspects of Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus. And we're going to do exactly that. It's really cool. Okay. In our annual trend projection, estimates issued and copyrighted in December annually for the forthcoming year, cyclical estimates again prove themselves. For example, 1974, at the end of 73, was a chaotic prospect after February was out of the way, as Jupiter would begin to move towards a square of Saturn, that's a 90 degree. And in April, the weak trine, which is 120 degree, of retrograde Uranus to Saturn would begin to shift to a square. These are bearish elements intensified by the node. Okay, so notice in there how he's using these. Okay, and I'm going to give you one more set of examples here. The 1974 market trends confirmed the 1932 to 65 upward major trend had reversed to a major downward trend in its first decline made in 1966. However, an intermediate upward trend correction should follow and be of considerable magnitude in prices and quite lengthy in time. In the projected trend estimates for 1975, issued and copyrighted in December 74, peak was anticipated May 29th, when a strong square, that's 90 degrees, of Jupiter and Saturn occurred and repeated in late June and again in mid-July. By December, Jupiter turning direct on the 11th, the upward swing was projected to resume. So you can see here how he's kind of using these planets. Let's begin by looking at sunspots first. Keep in mind that sunspot activity is claimed by Jensen to be the underpinnings of the business cycle. To measure the business cycle, we will use the stock market, which is not an exactly pure match for a gauge, but is readily available to the viewer, meaning you. Okay, 1974 stock market low, 1975 low in sunspots. This purple line represents the sunspots. Okay, so it goes up to here, and I kind of wanted to draw this underneath the stock thing, so it wasn't like this sunspot cycle peak low here and this peak high, but I wanted to keep under the data to really give you a graphical view. And from in the 1975 area to really 1982, all the market did is go sideways, and there was a bump up here from what was about the 900 to 1,000 area to about around 1,200, and then that went all the way to 85, 86, when the sunspots started going up, and you get these massive rallies. Okay, that went up. We crashed, but the sunspots still continued up. So did the market. Okay, so as you can see here, you can kind of see the effects on this. All right, even though these were known as the Carter years in America, so even though we had rising sunspots, the economic activity was lambasted by other factors, which we'll get into here in a minute. This is 1990 to current. There was a high here and kind of went sideways here up until 95, 96 area when the sunspots started to increase, and we increased into this area. Look at this upward thrust. Okay, then we peaked out. We went down to the market went down to 2009 low, and sunspots went down to 2010. It recovered, went sideways a little bit, then really started heading up with the sunspots, as you can see. We're currently going down to the 2020-2022 area, and that's going to be important for many reasons, as we'll see coming up. Okay, the only part that really doesn't fit is this debt bubble, and because this was economic activity that was generated there, but it was done by debt. Okay, and of course we paid the price and are still paying the price today for this. Okay, but as soon as this was down, you could see how that went up. Okay, so it's relatively easy to predict these things, and it may be a good idea to purchase stocks for the long haul in 2022 when you get this bottom again, because look at what happens when you get these. Boom, boom. Unless someone like Carter's in the White House, you can forget about it. But other than that, okay, you see that? You see the dynamics of how this works? All this is up on stilts. And when something happened, and we'll get into what that exactly that is up here, and the whole house of cards came down, and we all know what the effects of that were. Okay, so we can readily see there is a direct correlation. The next step is to combine this with the planets Jupiter, Saturn, and Uranus, known as the financial planets. Favorable aspects. Rule number 1, favorable aspects between the planets are deemed to be 60 and 120 degrees. Unfavorable, called hard aspects, are 45, 90, 135, and 180. Jupiter conjunct Uranus is favorable. Jupiter conjunct Saturn is unfavorable. Saturn conjunct Jupiter, or anything else for that matter, is unfavorable. Keep those rules in mind. Rule number 2, you have increasing sunspots. Planetary aspects that are favorable during that time will produce upward thrust, and we're going to see that in a minute. You have increasing sunspots, and you have unfavorable aspects, which will produce sideways markets with a slight downward bias. What you got is kind of a canceling out. You have increasing sunspots and unfavorable planetary, so it kind of goes sideways with what's called a correction or a downward bias. Decreasing sunspots, when you have those going on and you have favorable aspects, the aspects will produce a sideways market or small rally. Okay, you have decreasing sunspots, and unfavorable aspects will produce large downdrafts, and we're going to see that many times over many years coming up. Okay, now this is the same thing that we saw earlier. This is the Sunspots Cycle. Okay, all I did was add on some planetary aspects. The red ones are hard aspects or difficult, and the green ones are considered good or favorable. Okay, here we had Jupiter 60 Uranus kick off a huge upward thrust that ended years later at Saturn 90 degrees Uranus, at what point we peaked out, and then we went sideways down once the sunspots peaked out. Okay, then we go up in this huge thing as a debt bubble, and this thing called Saturn 180 Uranus ended that party right there. Okay, Everybody woke up. That's like when you wake up with a huge hangover. Well, you know what happens. Okay. Now we went down to that 2009 area. We went back up. Look at that. Boom. Okay. Right there, we go up, and we're kind of going sideways here at this point. And then a Jupiter 60 Uranus comes in, and we go rocketing up again. Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful. Okay. So as you can see, there is a direct correlation here. Okay. Well, take this, and do the work on the 2020-22 area and see what you find. Okay. Here's the what's called the Great Depression in the 1930s. What happened was we peaked out in sunspots in 28, 29 and started heading down to 1933 area. Okay. Then we started heading back up. But while we're going down, we just keep getting pummeled with these bad, hard aspects. And that's what intensified it. Year after year, each year getting successively worse. Okay? Worse and worse and worse as this thing drugged out because they just kept getting pummeled. Okay? And you can see the decimated markets. We went from about the 360, which is a circle area, down to about 40. I mean, damn near 90% of the market was lost in a matter of years. They got pummeled. It was bad. And this was the cause. Anybody can predict it. Anyone that sees this video can easily predict the next 100 years if they want to. Okay? Because we have sunspot estimates that go out that far, you see. All right? If you have gained insight from my video, subscribe so you can get the latest on my free market calls, forecasts, commentary, and teachings. Knowledge is priceless. Hey, this is BA telling you, reminding you that you can succeed. Bye-bye.